Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Fantasy 420. My name is Eric Presserin, and it's Friday, February 9th, and it's 420 somewhere. About me, a little bit, I am a 20-year fantasy player, so football, baseball, and basketball. I currently reside, born and raised, actually, in California, but I am a Cleveland and Ohio State sports fan in particular, but I more am a fan actually of players who do individually great things in those fantasy sports, and investing some money in there. Um, so it's a little bit better when they do it for yourself. So um, that's what I like to currently put more of my time into. So anyway, this channel's goal is just to tell you, first of all, that you should just ingest fantasy information as much as possible if you're trying to get better at it. Whether that's good information, you can take it and use it yourself, or bad information. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you can obviously not use that, but you can also use that as a tool to, okay, if most people are thinking this way, I can take advantage of that by trading for this player or selling a player for more value. So it can give you a better outlook on how the general public or somebody else might think. So, anyway, um, it's impossible for me to know the size of your league, know who's in your league. So you're going to have to take that and adjust it to your own individual settings, obviously, but any information is just good. So that's the primary goal of this channel, to work with you and have the best team possible. And that usually means making the playoffs. And the goal on any endgame fantasy season is obviously to win a championship, but I think a better marker is making the playoffs consistently, because this fantasy season accumulates a vast majority of its weeks just getting to the playoffs. So if you can do that consistently, then the playoffs are more of a coin flip, and hopefully you win and you have a strong team who's there in the end. But that's not always the case, and you shouldn't always evaluate your season based on not winning a championship. So we want to win, and we're going to do our best to make it there, but we just want to be consistent and make it the best possible. And that's also for fantasy daily players, obviously. You want to just be consistent. So that's our goal. Um, so obviously today's primary focus in this video is going to be the NBA, and it's going to be the trade deadline deals. So there's a lot of really exciting, important deals went down to affect fantasy especially, and I just want to emphasize that a lot of these points are going to be for points based leagues. So obviously if you're going to do a head to head, categories based league, you can apply a lot of these too, but they're going to be towards points based leagues because that's what I'm play in, whether it's FanDuel, daily, or I try to also incorporate myself into season-long points-based leagues because that make it a little less hard on myself. But like I said, a lot of these you can sort of generalize into the categories leagues as well. So the first, obviously, deal or non-deal, but is going to be Anthony Davis. He stayed put in New Orleans. The best case for him scenario obviously was going to go to the Lakers. Him and LeBron were going to make the playoffs, and they were just going to try to recruit Kawhi in the offseason. But for this season, pound him into the ground and set up for the future. So that would have been the best case. You're happy as a Anthony Davis fan that the Pelicans said he was going to play for the rest of the year, but you're also going to take that with a grain of salt, because they're going to play him up until now, a little bit after the All-Star break, but they're falling out of contention, and that's going to be rhetoric at some point. He's going to get hurt, get nicked up, and they're going to sit him. They're not going to risk their biggest piece that's not going to be there past this offseason. It was clear that they wanted to get the Celtics in there. They wanted to get the Knicks, and depending on whoever makes the lottery and offers them a crazy pick, they wanted to get as many teams possible in there to trade with. So they're not going to risk him getting injured. So you're happy, and I think it's a sell time, because if you can convince somebody, hey, Anthony Davis is going to play for the rest of the year, the Pelicans said so, give me 2 blue chip players for Anthony Davis, I think you should really consider it, because I think at the end of the year, especially during the playoffs, he's not going to be there for you. I think they're going to rescind on their word a little bit, or like I said, those injuries are going to crop up. So I would try to sell Davis now. And the Pelicans did make a move, though. They did send Mirotic to Milwaukee for Jason Smith, Stanley Johnson, and 4 second-round picks. I mean, I think that was a good move for the Bucks, because they get Mirotic in there, and the Pelicans are just going to use the picks to rebuild. But I think the winners in the whole deadline in general are, for the Pelicans, are Julius Randle and Jrue Holiday, primarily because with Davis missing time at the end and Mirotic gone, I think that Randle is just going to get played to he can't stand anymore. And Holiday has already been kind of your mid 40s, low 40s point per game point guard. And I think that he's going to transcend into, okay, he's our new franchise because Davis is gone. So I think he's, like I said, with Randle, his usage is just going to go through the roof, and they're going to feature him, and he's going to be a high 40s, low 50s, but that will put him into first round value. So I think that if you can buy on those 2 guys, I would try and sell Davis, but it might be a little difficult considering your league and who you're playing with and how knowledgeable they are. But that's how I would gauge the Pelicans at the deadline. The next biggest deal, I would say, at the deadline would be Tobias Harris going to the Clippers. Going from the Clippers to the Sixers. It was Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, Mike Scott for Landry Shamet, Wilson Chandler, Mike Muscala, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. Now, for Philadelphia, this was a real-life huge win, especially if they can get Butler and Harris after this year. Celtics have really disappointed, I felt, so far this year. They were going to run through the East after last season and how well they did against the Cavs in the Eastern Conference without, Irving. I thought they were going to just blow through everybody. And Leonard has been a lot better for the Raptors, and that situation has gelled better than I thought. The Bucks are the team in the NBA right now. But I feel like the Sixers are going to be the best team and probably win the East after this trade in real life. Harris, Butler, Simmons, and Embiid, I feel like, is the best 4-man duo. And then you have Redick to spread the floor. It should work really well. However, this is a fantasy show, so this hurts everybody in Philly. Not Embiid and Simmons as much. Simmons is just going to have more toys to play with, so it might even help Simmons and just give him more assists, and this team might just score more points and just be better defense. I think they're going to be better defensively no matter what, and they could be more efficient offensively, and it's definitely going to help because they're going to be more healthy and not have to play everybody as much minutes. But this really hurts Butler and obviously Tobias. Gigantically. I was going to say that Butler was a buy option before this trade. He was really trending up in terms of minutes and points, but also because he had a 50 in there mixed with a couple 40s recently, and he's also coming off an injury, and the All-Star break was coming up. So I felt like you could buy him for somebody who's been frustrated with him, and also that All-Star break was going to help him more than anybody because he could get healthy after his recent injuries, but also gel with the Sixers team. But I mean, with Harris now, it's just another mouth to feed. I know Butler is an alpha and he's going to get his, but I just feel like this is really going to his floor is going to be less now and his ceiling is going to be less and he's just capped. I mean, even more so Tobias Harris. I mean, he was 41st average rank this season in fantasy, and he goes from probably, the first offensive option when he's on the floor on the Clippers, maybe Lou Williams is the number one option, but to fourth. I mean, he was already pretty efficient from the field as it is. I mean, it'll probably stay that way. It probably won't get more efficient, but the overall numbers will definitely go down. So, I mean, I would try to sell them, Harris or Butler, but I don't think anybody will buy them at this point. But I would definitely try. I don't think Simmons or Embiid will lose that much value, but if somebody's going to give you super duper star stuff for them still, I would probably consider it. So, that was the second biggest trade. The third biggest trade, obviously, I would say Porzingis, Kristaps going to Dallas from the Knicks with Tim Hardaway Jr., Trey Burke, and Courtney Lee. And this was for Dennis Smith Jr., Wes Matthews, DeAndre Jordan, and 2 future first-round picks. In real life, I think this was a big win for Dallas. I think that Luka and Porzingis, just the league obviously trending towards outside shooting. You have a franchise point guard who can spread the floor in Doncic, and you have a franchise big who can spread the floor in Kristaps. Both are athletic, both are really young, and both are foreign and should grow together in the future. It seems like a perfect pair. They're going to be contending, I think, with those two players, assuming they can stay healthy, especially Kristaps, obviously. So those firsts won't be as big of an issue, hopefully, for them. Fantasy-wise, obviously, that's a different story. Porzingis isn't going to play, so I don't really feel like he needs to be mentioned in that aspect, obviously. 10 to 12 team leagues, I wouldn't really consider anybody besides. I would definitely buy Hardaway Jr. He's probably going to fill in that off-guard role with Doncic, and he shouldn't see really a drop-off. And I think you can convince somebody, hey, that role won't be there for him, and this would be a good time to buy. So obviously Dennis Smith Jr., he's not a pickup anymore off of free agency, but if you can find somebody who's low on him at this point, he's going to be a franchise. He's going to do whatever he wants with the ball. Nobody's going to stop him. He's going to be in a points league probably, I would say, after the All-Star break, and he's doing whatever he wants. It's going to be like a high 30s, low 40s beast going forward. So, also, I would say buying Kevin Knox if you're in a 10 to 12 team league, and he's going to get 30 a night. He's going to be featured along with DSJ. He's going to be there on All-Star Weekend now after the snub in his All-Stars challenge. So he's going forward. They're going to be featuring those two guys. You can probably find Knox on your waiver wire, a lot of them. So the other guys, I would say you didn't have any of the other guys on your roster. You probably have DeAndre, and I would say he loses value, but I wouldn't say he's a drop. I would say they're going to play him and buy out Cantor, still move forward with their younger guys in Cornette and Mitchell Robinson. But I don't think he loses that. You're still keeping him on your team. I don't think you're dropping him, especially in a points league where his free throws won't hurt you as much. So, um, obviously, we mentioned that the Lakers didn't get Anthony Davis, so that was a best case scenario for Davis and a worst case scenario for the Lakers. But I think that there were a couple players who benefited from this trade now currently on the Lakers. Um, the first being they did make a trade. They did trade Beasley and Ivica Zubac for Muscala. They flipped him after the previous deal with the Clippers and the Sixers. They flipped Muscala. So I think this is a real buy low point for JaVale McGee, and I would go get him. He's 75% owned. You could get him on 25 fourth of the leagues, but if you can get him as just a cheap throw-in, he has kind of disappointed, but with Zubac gone, I think Chandler has definitely lost a step. Excuse me. And they're going to roll with McGee going forward. They're definitely, like I said, going to make that playoff push with LeBron no matter what. I firmly believe they will make the playoffs no matter what. LeBron won't let them not make the playoffs. And McGee is going to get fed 30 minutes a game now that Zubac's not there. They don't have to develop him going forward. I thought that they did sell low on Zubac, but McGee plays a lot better with LeBron, and he's going to get those minutes now, and they're going to be a contending team going forward for the playoffs. I don't see why his minutes won't be there. And he's especially valuable in points leagues because he plays defense. He's not inherently reliable on scoring points. He's going to get blocks. He's going to get steals. He's going to get rebounds, a lot of them. So he's more valuable in a points league based on the fact that he provides a ton of defensive stats. And I really think I would buy into JaVale. Like, if you could get a trade for somebody that you like and then you get McGee as a throw-in because somebody's frustrated with him, I would really go for that. Another big trade going forward was Marc Gasol. This was Marc Gasol going from Memphis to the Raptors for Jonas Valanciunas, Delon Wright, CJ Miles, and a 2014 second-round pick. I think this is a huge win in real life for the Raptors just because they might convince Kawhi to stay. I did not think they'd be able to have a chance to actually do so going forward. Like, I didn't think Oklahoma really had a chance before last year to convince Paul George, especially since LeBron signed with LA, not to go with LA. But Lowry and Gasol, and maybe they could convince somebody else to come, or, they have a pretty good GM in Ujiri. Maybe Leonard will stay with the Raptors. I think that with them now getting Gasol, I think the Sixers are still going to win the East, but with them getting Gasol, they'll be right there and they can make that great pitch to Leonard. Like, hey, this was just, how it began. So let's finish it, and we'll offer you more money than you can imagine to do so. He might actually stay, even if they don't win the Eastern Conference Finals, and that would be really good for them. And I think that this could put them in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's going to be I think it's a four-headed race: Sixers, Bucks, Raptors, and Boston. And I think Boston's going to falter. Kyrie hasn't been the same since LeBron left. I'm obviously a Cavs fan, so wasn't too happy when Kyrie left, and he's never been a huge team leader guy. I was kind of happy that he took back the comments about LeBron, but I would take those three teams over them. And yeah, I would think that Milwaukee, I would take the Sixers obviously to win the East, and then I would take the Raptors after this Gasol addition. I really like it. I would try to buy Gasol. I wouldn't give too much more for him in a points league, but I do think he will obviously stay healthier now that he's on a team that could make the finals, and he's going to play going forward out the wazoo. And I would definitely buy into him, and I would also buy into him in a categories league. I think he's going to be super efficient. Leonard and Lowry should take a ton of looks off of him, so he'll be able to do whatever he wants. So I would actually buy Gasol in both formats, and the Raptors too. I think that they have a chance to be right there with the Sixers and Bucks. I think they could, and they could even win the East. I think those three teams are the cream of the crop with Boston right behind. It wouldn't shock me if Boston won, but I think those three are the best, and I like it for Gasol, and I like it for the Raptors. So, last, I would say, no, we got a couple big trades still. Fultz, Markelle Fultz was traded from the Sixers to Orlando for Jonathan Simmons, a top 20 protected first round pick from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and a second round pick. I definitely think I'm not really a big fan of people selling low nowadays on assets that are super young, but I did think Fultz kind of it got to that point where they needed a change of scenery. The Sixers, I think, actually got pretty good compensation. A first round pick and a second round pick for somebody who's oft injured, was extremely unhappy, and with Harris and Butler, you kind of knew that with their intention of, they said they were going to keep both of them. And if that's the case, Fultz is kind of a bench guy. And I think that this was the time to sell him, and they actually did pretty good getting stuff back. So I think the Sixers did good, and I think Orlando did well too. Fultz, Aaron Gordon, I think Vucevic will probably come back in the offseason. They'll pay him a ton of money. And I think they'll maybe be a trade away from making some noise in the East, but if Fultz could come back, you never know. If there's a universe where Markelle Fultz comes back and contributes, not necessarily as a number one pick, but an early first round prospect, then Orlando could be looking good in the future. But for fantasy, Fultz doesn't matter this year. He's probably not going to play, especially if Orlando loses a bunch more games. I don't think he comes back at all, period, basically. But especially if Orlando's not in the playoffs, they're not going to rush him back for any reason. So, but I do think Fultz isn't even in consideration for that, but I do think there were 3 clear winners from this trade, and they all are actually from Orlando, because I don't think they're going to tank, and they're in a strange situation, just like Washington, because they don't want to tank, but they're right there with the 8th seed, and they're already way too many wins ahead of getting the number 1 pick. So they might as well just try to win as many games as possible, and making the playoffs would be, for the Wizards, without Wall, to sell their fan base, hey, we made the playoffs with Beal going forward. That would be a pretty good sell. And the same with the Magic, just, hey, we made the playoffs, we got Fultz, we know what's going on, we're just a piece or two away. So I actually think going forward with Orlando players, there's 3 clear winners, and I would buy into them going forward, because I think they will play until the end. They might sit at the very end of the year, but I think they're going to be contending just there enough until the very end to where you can buy into them and count on them to be there for the playoffs. So the first one being Terrence Ross. He's just top 70 average player over the last couple of weeks. He didn't get traded. He's got steady minutes. He's arguably their primary scoring option when he's on the floor, aside from Vucevic. He's been on a roll, like I said, didn't get traded, and he's available in just less than half the leagues. So I would definitely buy into him if you were a little shaky going forward, which I obviously wouldn't blame you for. I also would buy Vucevic, or more importantly, not sell Vucevic. Just want to remind everybody where you got him. His pre-rank was around 60, so you probably got him around the 5th or 6th round. His current rank in points averages leagues is around a first round pick, so 12, 13. I'm not inclined to sell him. Some people, I have him in a bunch of my leagues, and some people are trying to convince me, hey, Vucevic and this person for a blue chip player because, I'm taking the risk because he's not going to play. And, they were telling me he was going to get traded. I didn't think he was going to get traded. And why would they trade him? He's balling out this year. And if there's any consensus opinion that his value isn't a blue chip player around the league, they might as well just re-sign him and keep him. And I think that's what you should do with fantasy. I think you should treat him as, hey, I did a great job drafting him and I shouldn't sell him because he's done well going forward. And like I said, I think the Magic are going to be there and they're going to play him. So he's putting up around 50 points a game. I would still trade him. I wouldn't overrate his value, but his value is still there and I will still expect it to be there. So I would not sell him, is more important with Vucevic. And finally, I would take Jonathan Isaac. He's been a very popular pickup recently, but he's still only 64% owned, and I think that should be around 100%. He's going to get 30 minutes a game, and he's going to hit that 30-point floor. He's going to maybe get you 40, and he's a good buy going forward. Finally, the last major trade I'm going to talk about today is Otto Porter going finally from Washington to Chicago for Jabari Parker and Bobby Portis. So I would say for real life, this is a good trade for Chicago because I think that they have a clear roster plan going forward, and that roster is pretty good and makes sense. You got Dunn, Levine, now Otto, and then you have Laurie, and I think you got a good core there. So that being said, from the fantasy aspect, I would definitely sell Otto Porter right now. I've never been a huge fan of his, so I like it because you can sell to your organization and your fans like, hey, this is our plan for Porter, but I don't really like Porter, so I would try to sell him to somebody and say, hey, Chicago just got him, and he's going to play a bunch of minutes, and here you go. He's going to reach his ceiling now on a different team. So I would definitely, from a fantasy aspect, try to sell Otto Porter. On the other side of the trade, real life, I'm not a huge fan from Washington. Haven't seen too much from Jabari Parker, and if you were going to acquire him, you probably should have just done so as a free agent in the offseason, and not a huge fan of Portis's defense, and like a small big man who can play offense, I wouldn't really trade for, so I would have thought they could have gotten better prospects from another team. There's a bunch of teams out there, and I thought that they could have gotten a better package for Porter than those two guys. However, from fantasy, I would actually buy both Parker and Portis. They're around, Parker is 46% owned, so you can pick him up in about half the leagues, and Portis is 53% owned, so you can pick him up in about half the leagues. You probably, I was going to say, you wouldn't even need to really add them in a trade. You could just tell somebody you wanted to trade for a better player, and then just, it wouldn't even be an add-in, just like, hey, can you flip me Portis or Parker, and if they even happen to have them on their team in your league. But I really think these guys, it's just because they gave up an asset, their team gave up an asset in Porter to acquire them. So they're inherently going to be played. I believe, by their team. And Wall's gone, Porter's now gone. There's minutes to be there. And since they acquired them because they wanted them and they believe they can fill a role on their team for some reason, I think they're going to play. So Parker has been proven this year, on average, when he's played, to actually be very productive. So I think if they're going to give him those minutes and he's going to be maybe even more determined than this offseason playing for his hometown team that he was now spurned by, he might even go off more. So I would actually buy into him and Portis. They're like I said, they traded for him and they're going to give him minutes. I really believe that they're going to give both of those guys as much as they can handle going forward. And like I said, that team along with Orlando is going to push for the playoffs. So their owner Leonidas said that they're not tanking, and he never will tank. So I actually will believe him, and I think that that team isn't going to tank going forward. So I would buy both those guys. Moving on to a lesser trade, Rodney Hood was traded from my team, the Cavs, to the original trade was to Portland, and then they got Wade, Baldwin, Stauskas, 2 second-rounders. They just flipped Stauskas and Baldwin for another trade, so they got Hood for 2 second-rounders. I don't care about Hood. I don't think he's relevant for fantasy. However, I do think for fantasy this trade is good for Seti. He had a right ankle injury recently, so he's been dropped like crazy, and he's around 38% owned, and he's just a guy who they've always wanted to succeed because he was their second-round pick who they home grew when LeBron was in town, and they've always had pride with him, and he was putting up 30 minutes a game and a 30 or 40-point floor overall, and he had an ankle injury. He was out for tonight. He's going to be out for tonight and the previous game, and everybody started mass dropping him. And then they trade Hood, and I'm just like, okay. So if he's available in your league, definitely scoop him up immediately. I think they're, like I said, just going to play him. And I mean, the team is not going to try to win, but they have to put out a team, and he's going to play. So, and he's going to put up numbers. He's recently been putting up numbers. And also, I would buy into Colin Sexton. He's only 40% owned, and he's, like I said, 30 minutes a night. He's arguably, him and Osman are the franchise players. They're the primary offensive targets for their team. So they're going to run the plays through them, get 30 minutes a night. They're going to provide. Sexton, I think, is going to provide you with obviously a lesser floor in a points league because he's not providing as much defensive stats or rebounds, but he could also outscore Osman on any given night. So both of those guys' floors are, I think, going to be around the same, and that's going to be 25 to 30 a night, and they could even go off for more. So I would buy both of them. A little bit more under the radar trades, just go through them a little bit quicker. Tyler Johnson was traded along with Wayne Ellington to the Rockets for from the Heat to the Suns. Tyler Johnson is now on the Suns with Wayne Ellington, who we think is going to be waived for Ryan Anderson, so who's now on the Heat. I wouldn't really take this into too much consideration, but I do think with Devin Booker's health and a tanking team, I would just keep that on the radar because Booker down the stretch might just get shut down and Johnson could just eat up a bunch of minutes. I mean, I think he'll get some minutes anyway, but especially down the stretch, I'd keep him on the radar. The Lakers traded for Reggie Bullock from Detroit for Michael Beasley and Zubac, as I mentioned earlier. I definitely think that I would monitor Bullock. Like I said, he started producing, especially recently for Detroit. So with Beasley being traded, I would, and the Lakers trading a pick for him, I definitely believe that when you, like I said, when you trade value for somebody, that person is going to play. So I think that I would monitor Bullock's minutes, and if he hits that 30 plus minute mark a night, he's going to produce. So I would just look into that. Um, Harrison Barnes was traded from Dallas for Justin Jackson and Zach Randolph for the Kings. Um, I would try to buy into Barnes. The Kings are trying to push forward with that team, and like I said, obviously bought into Barnes, and he's going to play, and he especially is making a ton of money, and he's actually one of the veterans on that team now, so he's just going to play going forward. So I'd buy into him. Um, Obviously, you're not buying into Luka Doncic because nobody's selling him at this point. Just more of a reason like he's going to do whatever he wants and he's going to produce maybe first round value going forward. He was probably the pick of the year in fantasy basketball. Just another less weapon he has to worry about taking shots away from him and Harrison Barnes. Finally, the last trade I would mention, the Rockets acquired Iman Shumpert. And like I said, the previous Wade Baldwin and Stauskas, they just got moved around in a jumble. Also, Alec Burks went from the Cavs to the Kings. So the only person I'm going to mention there just is Shumpert because I think this doesn't help anybody. It just hurts all those secondary guys on Houston that you're buying into right now. There's Shumpert, Gordon, Fareed, Austin Rivers on deeper teams, some teams, Tucker. Those dudes are, especially when Capella comes back and if Paul can stay healthy, those dudes are all just hurting each other's value. It's just more mouths to feed on that team. And I'm not necessarily sure that I would buy any of them. I think now, if anybody's going to buy Fareed from you, buy Eric Gordon. I doubt that. Buy PJ Tucker. I would try to sell any tertiary member of the Rockets. Harden's going to get his always. Capella's going to come back. Maybe him and Fareed both play, and Fareed doesn't lose a ton of value, but I wouldn't buy any of those guys, and I definitely would try to sell any of them if anybody's going to give you anything. The last person I will mention as a beneficiary from the Clippers is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's only 32% owned. I would try to go get him in 12-team, maybe even 10-team leagues. He's just going to see a ton of minutes now that everybody's being jettisoned out of LA, and he's going to be their young guy that they're going forward with. So 32% owned, definitely go forward with him. All right. Finally, going to finish up the premiere episode with a few notes of guys I think you should be looking into for various reasons. Robert Covington, he's the 68th average per the season player this year, and he's obviously been out for over a month now, and I just wanted to remind everybody that he finished 37th overall last year, and he was the main piece in a Jimmy Butler trade. So he, especially with Josh Okogie, extremely underwhelming in his absence. He's had only a few good games since Covington's been out. So I would definitely think Minnesota's still competing for that playoff spot, and him providing the defensive numbers. If there's a team who's losing a bunch of games or they're frustrated with Covington and think he's going to come back slowly from an injury, or I would just try to buy him. Or if, like I said, add him in a trade. You'll probably have to pay a little bit more than an add in a trade, but I think it would definitely be worth it going forward with him. They're just going to play him as many minutes as they can. All-Star break is even more time for him to get healthy. He should hopefully return back healthy and be ready to go. So just a little reminder on Robert Covington. Also a reminder on Karras. He's Livert. He's coming back from the Nets. Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be injured, and I would expect them to bring him along slowly, but just a reminder, he's only 69% earned, and that should be around 100%. The Nets are competing for a, almost crazy to say that, like a top 5 playoff seed, so he's going to come back and he's going to play as much as he can handle. So I would definitely buy in him, pick him up, or add him in a trade. Tristan Thompson will be coming back at any time after the All-Star break, so I do think the Cavs will play him because they're paying him a bunch of money, and why not? So I do. The coaching staff there has never been too fond of Zizic, so if you have him, he's a drop, and I'd probably definitely entertain the idea of picking up Tristan. Kevin Huerter on Atlanta, only 34% owned, and I think that has to be near 100%, even in a 10-team or 12-team league. I actually expected the Hawks to move on from Bazemore and or Taurean Prince. It's a little frustrating that they're still with the team, but I think that Huerter will get those minimum low 30-minute per game numbers. He produces steals, blocks, he fills it up when he's out there, and he's a young guy on a team with trying to get him experience with absolutely nothing to gain besides tanking. So, like I said, Bazemore is going to be along those Davis lines of he's going to miss games because he's that veteran. He's going to not be there in the future, so he's going to get injured, and Huerter's going to be that guy producing, I would say a low 30 minutes. It's going to be creeping up closer to the high to mid 30. They're just going to get him as much experience possible because why not? They don't give a crud about friggin' anybody else there anyway, besides maybe Prince, but I thought they were going to sell him. So the last note of this first episode, I would try to buy Hassan Whiteside. There's going to be some players in your league who are convinced that this recent surge is the reason to sell Hassan Whiteside, and I would be actually one of those people, but he's just been so inconsistent historically, and Spoelstra has always had a thing for not playing Hassan Whiteside at the end of games because he can't shoot free throws, but also I don't think Spoelstra has ever been a fan of him in general, his attitude, his effort level, in his opinion. But I've always liked Whiteside as a player. I've always thought he was really talented, and I just thought with Dwayne Wade saying recently about how the Heat have a chance, their best chance to win, and they're the best team with Hassan Whiteside beasting in the game. So I really do think he's that franchise player. Hopefully this is finally the minutes and revelation we needed to put him on the floor and get the Miami their best team and wins, and they're another team competing for a playoff spot in that crappy East, so I expect them to play him going forward, and hopefully this was their main reason to do that. Anyway, guys, I'm really happy to finally get this first episode going. This is hopefully going to be a daily thing for me, and I really look forward to tomorrow and talking about a different sport, probably, but if you want to leave a comment and tell me what you want to hear about, maybe I'll specifically shout out some trades that you want me to mention or talk to you about. But otherwise, gentlemen, ladies, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Good luck in your fantasy games, and have a great night.